these things are absolutely made up from the word go, and I discussed this with George the other day, and we were going to make a point to bring this up.
Right.
I know a guy who works deep in the heart of the quant industry. He writes algorithms for these people that are very clever, that think themselves smart, that created all these derivatives. And one day he was telling me this story, and one day he said he got a phone call from somebody upstairs that wanted to know the value and the number of years duration on a particular derivative they've sold. And it had been sold in like 2002, and it had been put in the computer for 3 years. He got a call in 2006, and somebody was still trying to make money off this thing. It had supposedly expired with a 3 in this particular years left or whatever digit counter that he had there, and so he just said, well, changed it to 13, so it had 2 more years to run. No one was the wiser.
Wow.
And who knows how many millions of people's, dollars were affected by this.
Well, as Webster has said, the amount of derivatives out there is between $1 and $2 quadrillion.
Yeah.
And they're all worthless, dead pieces of paper.
Yeah. And they're susceptible. The kind of thing that keeps me up nights, I wake up literally in a cold sweat thinking about it. What would happen if there were a coordinated attack on the SQL Server back ends for even one major clearing bank like BIS or fill in, whichever clearing bank you want?
Sure, right.
There's not enough paper to do the 10 million different derivatives contracts out there. I mean, think about it, 100 pages each or more.
Yeah. Wow.
It's just beyond humans. And so all we've got is an electronic record. And that's one reason I have told people that read my website, go ahead and every day before you go to bed, print out until we're through this window and know what's going to occur. Print out your stock trading portfolio, print out your checking account balance and your credit card balance from your online sources.
Wow.
You've got that stuff.
Interesting.
In the end, it probably will not matter, though.
Well,
I mean, on an individual basis, it may well, but in the general, it's in sort of during this period of time, and I think that people need to understand that the old paradigm is dying, and that old paradigm, once we shift into release language, will not return. The idea that we'll be doing business in a global monetarist, credit card, oil eating, intercontinental trading society 4 years from now, 3 years from now, even 2 years from now, starts to lose credibility real fast once we start looking into our data. Our lives will not be the same after we get into this release. We have some hints as to what's coming, but it probably won't be that your credit card statement will be that pertinent 6 or 7 months from now.
The average American household, $23,000 to $24,000 in credit card debt. Many of these accounts are going to go delinquent, no question about that. I don't know what the bankruptcy laws are now. I know they've been tightened up thanks to Joe Biden. That's not as easy to declare complete bankruptcy as it was. So we got a lot ahead of us, folks. It's not near to being over. I don't even think we may be closing in on the beginning of the ending of the beginning, but that's about it. We'll find out more from George and Clif in just a couple of minutes. HalfPastHuman.com is their website. Absolutely fascinating material. And I might also add that their material has been, shall we say, borrowed by more than a few people on the internet. And
also, let's mention Urban Survival. That's where we have our free public writing on the material.
We'll do that in just a minute. Stand by. Okay, and back with George and Clif. Where were we, George? I think you were finishing up a point, weren't you?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, in many ways, Jeff, the period ahead looks like it will be the delayed start of the Second Great Depression, or as a friend of mine calls it, the Greater Depression, because we really should have slid into it in the wake of the Internet bubble bursting. And from a policy standpoint...
Now, that's interesting. That you're talking about the dot-com crash?
Oh, sure.
Okay. But what kept us from going in then? How did they keep this dead man up walking?
Yet another bubble. And we've seen the bubbles grow, and it's kind of an inverse pyramid. A small bubble must always mathematically lead to a larger bubble in order to subsume its problems. And eventually you get to the point where we're at now, where the largest possible bubble has been created, derivatives.
1 quadrillion worth.
Correct. We cannot create any other bubble. The second largest bubble was the global housing boom that occurred in the developing countries. And it's just an issue of the Kondratev wave and what they had to do to try and derail it. And they were even talking about, oh, yeah, we could have fixed the previous depression if we'd only had $5 billion to recapitalize the banks. All would have been well and good. Question is, where do you get real money these days, especially when you've created all these huge bubbles and the whole world is dependent upon it? You just don't.
The real structural problem right now, Jeff, is that this $700 billion, which really seems like I can't find a limit to it. It's like
it's 850 on paper and 1.8 trillion in reality. It's one more massive insult to the American public, one more ripoff, one more theft before things get real ugly this winter. That's all it is.
Yeah, exactly. And having gotten to this point, we literally are on the verge of replaying the depression that happened in the 1930s. We got out of it. We skated. We should have had more severe problems on the backside of the internet bubble, but the timing of 9/11 was such that the Bush administration was able to spin things into a general war on Islamic fundamentalism.
Right.
The
total fraud war on terror, the orchestration of 9/11, not the timing, if you'll go with me with that far.
Sure. But what that did is, that gave us a hell of a spending bump. That was like the Works Progress Administration.
Well, then they also changed policy, George, to back in that, and they created the situation where we had a shifting down of dollar rates for employment, and we had the large sucking sound as we pulled across hundreds of, or millions of illegals in our country, which put housing pressure on the whole economy throughout the entire nation. We had immigration going as far north as the Canadian border and beyond, and the housing pressure was part of the whole boom.
35 to 40 million illegals now from over 70 different countries.
And they could all get loans from Freddie and Fannie.
Yep.
And free medical care for the most part.
Free education, free medical care, free food, free housing, you name it.
So it cut the basically the underpinning out from the social structure. It altered the social contract in many small towns. It changed things radically, and they did it in essence to keep the housing boom going in order to have that bubble go, which in turn supported the next bubble up, which was the collateralized housing obligations in all their plethora of plenitude and different forms.
Right. Adjustable rate mortgages, of course, were an incredibly metastasizing cancer that went along for a long time, and now it's everywhere.
The liar's loans, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And let's not forget realtors who were after that 6 or 7% commission. Let's not forget mortgage lenders. I'm getting there. Let's not forget mortgage lenders, and let's not forget their partners in crime, the appraisers. You know, I need an appraisal for X to get this loan made. Can you help me out? I mean, it's these people. It's a good old boys network all the way. I don't care where you are. It's who you know, and they wanted to keep this absolute deadly fiction completely spinning out of control, and they did. Now, my question about the derivatives market and the larger financial paradigm, which involves this entire collapse and catastrophe, how many people, approximately in round numbers, were involved with pulling all this off? And most of it was planned, if not all of it, to one degree or another. I'm going to say, what, 40, 50,000 people out of 6.5 billion?
No, you can nail it down even tighter than that. It goes right down to the.
I'm being kind. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it goes right down to the membership of the Bilderbergers.
I would pull it down, but I just want to keep people on the believable plane here.
Yeah.
Yes, but you're quite right. We're talking about 5,000 people tops.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, those people that were culpable and involved were motivated by something other than knowledge of what was going on. And in that sense, they have their own karmic debt because they participated, just like a prison guard participates in abuses in an abusive system. But they may end up in that job because they're attempting something good in the sense of trying to support their family, etc. Now, there is greed all over, and everybody's going to end up paying for it. But karmically, some people are going to end up getting an interesting little visit this future.
Well, Richard Fold, the former CEO of Lehman, you heard that last hour. I pulled that story up. Was punched out, knocked out cold in the Lehman Brothers gym after it was announced they were going down. Somebody came up. I'm surprised, frankly, given the number of people going postal in the last 10, 15 years, that we haven't seen some very violent...
Yeah, not yet. We will. The language is very negative that way. We're going to see some...
Yeah, next summer.
No, it's going to even be earlier. Some of the newer release language is suggesting that we're going to have some kind of an incident in which maybe as many as 40 people will be shot on American soil. Who's going to do the shooting? I'm not really sure. It's not saying that it's military.
Well, there are a lot of people